Just press the button with the house on it, Grandpa. The house. It means home. It's a metaphor. Jason's voice dripped with that specific brand of exhaustion reserved for teaching toddlers or the elderly. He was standing over me, smelling of artisanal coffee and expensive beard oil, tapping his foot on the hardwood floor of my daughter's living room. The tapping was a rhythmic, a nervous tick. He was wearing a T-shirt that said, "Disrupt or Die," across the chest in a sans serif font. I looked at the remote control in my hand. It was a sleek black slab of plastic with 40 buttons, none of which offered any tactile feedback. One looked like a small, colorful explosion. Another was simply labeled Netflix in red. I knew exactly how it worked. It was a Bluetooth low-energy device. The reason it wasn't responding was that the television's receiver buffer was saturated, because it was trying to download a firmware update in the background while simultaneously indexing the metadata of the streaming library. It wasn't broken. It was poorly architected. "I am pressing it, Jason," I said, keeping my voice level. My hand didn't shake. It hadn't shaken in 71 years, not when I was soldering motherboards in a garage in Palo Alto in 78, and certainly not now. The interface is lagging. The interrupt request from the remote isn't being prioritized by the processor. Jason laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. He turned to his mother, my daughter Sarah, who was busy arranging hors d'oeuvres on a slate platter that probably cost more than my first car. "Did you hear that, Mom? Interrupt request. He's trying to use big words he heard on the Discovery Channel. It's cute. It's like when a parrot mimics a conversation." Sarah smiled sympathetically, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked tired. "Be nice, Jace. Dad, just give him the remote. You know technology isn't your thing anymore. You get frustrated, and then your blood pressure goes up." I handed the plastic rectangle to my grandson. He snatched it, swiped his thumb across a touch panel I hadn't even bothered to engage, and the massive 85-inch screen exploded into life, showing a dashboard of apps. "See?" Jason smirked, flopping onto the couch and putting his feet up on the coffee table. "It's intuitive. UI/UX design, Grandpa. It's what I do. We design for the user, not the machine. That's why I'm a senior product lead at 26, and you, well, you can watch your westerns now." He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung in the air like stale smoke. "And you are a retired clerk who lives in the in-law suite and can't work a TV." I sat back in my armchair, folding my hands in my lap. I watched the screen. It was clutter, noise, 1,000 colors fighting for attention, consuming bandwidth, offering nothing of substance. "So, Jason," I said, watching him scroll through his phone while the TV played a muted cooking show, "how is work at Apex? I heard on the news you're rolling out the new core banking integration this weekend." Jason looked up, surprised I even knew the words core banking. His eyebrows shot up. "Yeah," he said, puffing out his chest slightly. He put his phone down, clearly eager to brag. "Project Titan. We're finally killing the dinosaur. We're migrating the old ledger system to a cloud-native, blockchain-adjacent architecture. It's going to be sick. Instant settlements, AI-driven fraud detection. We're literally deleting the legacy code tonight at midnight." "Deleting it?" I asked. A cold spike of alarm went through me. Not fear. I didn't feel fear about code, only about incompetence. It was the sensation of watching a child play with a loaded gun. "You're doing a hot swap on a Sunday night without running the old mainframe in parallel for a reconciliation period?" Jason rolled his eyes so hard I thought they might disconnect from his optic nerves. "Grandpa, please. Parallel running is for boomers. It's inefficiency. We have confidence in our stack. We've been testing in the sandbox for weeks. The old system, that COBOL trash, it's holding us back. It's spaghetti code written by dead guys in the 70s. It can't handle the volume. We're cutting the cord. Disruption. Disruption, I repeated. The word tasted like ash. Exactly. Move fast and break things. I looked at him. I looked at his $200 haircut. I looked at the confidence that came from never having to manually recover a corrupted database at 3 a.m. with a CEO breathing down your neck. He called it spaghetti code. In 1974, I sat in a basement with no windows for 6 months. I drank black coffee that tasted like battery acid and smoked 2 packs of Lucky Strikes a day. I wrote the transaction processing kernel for the First National Bank, which later became Apex. I wrote it in COBOL 74. It wasn't spaghetti. It was a cathedral. Every line was a structural load-bearing wall. I had optimized the decimal arithmetic to handle fractions of a cent without floating point errors, effectively inventing a way to save the bank $40 million a year in rounding losses. I had built the error handling routines to be bulletproof, creating a logic loop that could self-correct data corruption before it hit the ledger. I had mapped the memory usage to the byte because back then, memory cost more than gold. It was 800,000 lines of pure, brutalist efficiency. It had run for 40 years without a single downtime event. It processed $3 trillion a day. It was the invisible spine of the American economy, and this boy, who thought a save icon looked like a floppy disk he had never held, was going to delete it at midnight. Jason, I said, leaning forward, I needed to try. For the sake of the pension funds, for the sake of the chaos that was looming. The transaction limit on the checking accounts, the variable definition. In the original code, it's defined as a packed decimal, PICS 9, open parenthesis 15, close parenthesis, comp 3. If your new cloud system sends a string or a binary integer without converting the endianness. Jason laughed out loud this time. It was a dismissive, pitying sound. Whoa, okay, Rain Man, where did you dig that up? Wikipedia? Packed decimal? Nobody uses that anymore. We use JSON objects. Data is data. It flows. It's fluid. Don't worry your head about it. Stick to your crossword puzzles and let the experts handle the fintech. I closed my mouth. There is a rule in engineering. You cannot fix a user error if the user refuses to admit they are broken. I had flagged the error. I had submitted the bug report verbally. The ticket was rejected. Dinner, Sarah called out from the kitchen. I stood up slowly. My knees popped. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I'm not hungry, I said. I think I'll go to my room. My head hurts. Okay, Dad, Sarah said, sounding relieved. She didn't want me at the table anyway. I slowed down the conversation. I was an anchor to a past they wanted to forget. I'll bring you a plate later. Don't stay up too late listening to your radio. I walked down the hall to the in-law suite. It was a small room at the back of the house. To them, it was a sad little cave where Grandpa hoarded old electronics and stared at the wall. To me, it was the command center. I entered the room and locked the door. The click of the deadbolt was the most satisfying sound I had heard all day. The room was dark, illuminated only by the amber glow of a terminal monitor sitting on my desk. It wasn't a modern 4K display. It was an IBM 3270 emulator running on a heavily modified Linux rig I had built inside the shell of an old VCR so Sarah wouldn't throw it out. I sat down in my ergonomic chair, the one luxury I insisted on. I put on my headset. I wasn't just a retired clerk named Bill Evans. I was ghost_root. I typed a command. The screen filled with cascading green text. I couldn't stop them. I didn't have write access to the new production servers. Jason's team had locked down the environment for the launch, but I had read access. I always had read access. I had left a back door in the compiler in 1985, a maintenance hatch that bypassed the security layer because it operated at the machine language level. It was a ghost key for a ghost door. I watched the logs. System time, 23:58:00 Eastern Standard Time. Status, migration initiated. Core mainframe, shutdown sequence. Armed, target, Project Titan, go live. Fools, I whispered to the amber text. Arrogant fools. I watched the data streams. I saw the new Titan system come online. It was flashy. It was sending millions of requests per second, bragging about its speed. System time, 0:0100 Eastern Standard Time. The switch was thrown. The old COBOL heart stopped beating. The new cloud brain took over. For 10 seconds, everything looked fine. The latency was low. The handshakes were completing. And then I saw it. It started as a ripple, a tiny discrepancy in the settlement ledger, a mismatch of 0.0000001%. The Titan system was treating the account balances as floating point numbers. It was rounding. It was guessing. You didn't check the precision, I hissed at the screen. You are rounding the pennies. You are stealing fractions of a cent from millions of people. Then the second wave hit. The dates. The legacy database stored dates in a compressed format to save memory. The new system read them as raw integers. Suddenly, every mortgage due in 2026 was being read as due in 1926. Error, error, invalid date format, calculation, exception, segmentation, fault. The Titan system panicked. It tried to roll back. But they had killed the old core. There was nothing to roll back to. They had jumped out of the plane and cut the parachute because they thought they could fly. The screen turned red. Critical failure. Transaction log corrupted. Database locked down. Kernel panic. I took off my headset. I could hear it through the walls. In the living room, Jason's phone chimed. It was a cheerful, innovative notification sound. Then it chimed again. Then it started ringing. Then a second phone started ringing. Then the smart TV in the living room, which was still on the news channel, suddenly cut to a breaking news banner. The sound of the broadcast was turned up. I stood up and walked to the door. I unlocked it and stepped into the hallway. Chaos. Jason was standing in the middle of the kitchen, his face the color of curdled milk. He was holding his phone with both hands, staring at it as if it were a live grenade. He was screaming. What do you mean it's gone? What do you mean the ledger is empty? Reboot it. Just restart the pods. He listened for a second, and his knees actually buckled. He grabbed the granite counter to stay upright. No, we can't restore from backup. The backup was overwritten by the migration. That was the plan. It was a forward-only deployment. We burned the bridges. Sarah was watching the TV, her hand covering her mouth. Breaking news, the anchor shouted, her voice laced with genuine panic. Global banking freeze. Apex Bank customers report zero balances. A TMS spitting out error cards across the East Coast. Riots reported at branches in London and Tokyo. The Federal Reserve has called an emergency meeting. Jason, Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Jason, that's your bank. That's your project. You said you were fixing it. It's not my fault, Jason shrieked. He looked like a child who had dropped an expensive vase and was looking for the cat to blame. It's the vendor. It's the cloud provider. They promise 99.9% uptime. The API is rejecting the calls. He looked at his laptop, which was open on the dining table. He ran over to it, typing furiously. His fingers were slipping on the keys. Why isn't it compiling? He sobbed. Tears were actually streaming down his face. Why is it giving me a hex dump? I don't read hex. I need the dashboard. Where is the GUI? Jason. It was his boss, the CTO, on speakerphone, a man named Peterson. I knew Peterson. He was a marketing guy who thought Python was a type of reptile. The Fed just called me. The Federal Reserve. They are threatening to seize the bank. We have lost $40 billion in the last 10 minutes. Fix it, or you're going to prison for negligence. I can't, Jason wailed. The error logs, they don't make sense. It says SOC7. It says A bend. I don't know what that means. Google says it's a mainframe crash. You told me we deleted the mainframe. We did, but the ghost is still there. The new system is trying to talk to the ghost and it's screaming. I walked into the light of the kitchen. My slippers made a soft scuffing sound on the tile. It's not screaming, I said calmly. It's choking. Jason spun around. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, terrified. Shut up, Grandpa. Not now. I am literally watching my life end. Go watch TV. Dad, please go back to your room, Sarah snapped, stress making her voice shrill. Jason is handling a national crisis. We don't need you wandering around. He isn't handling anything, I said. I walked to the refrigerator and took out a bottle of water. I unscrewed the cap. The crack of the plastic seal was sharp in the silence. He is looking at a System 0C7 obend, a data exception error. He tried to shove a floating point variable into a packed decimal field, and because he didn't run a parallel test, he corrupted the index pointers. Silence, absolute stunned silence. The only sound was the whirring of the refrigerator and the distant wail of sirens outside. Jason stared at me. His mouth hung open. What did you say? Packed decimal, I repeated. Comp 3. You didn't listen at dinner, Jason. I told you about the variable definition. You laughed. You said data is fluid. I took a sip of water. It was cool, refreshing. How? Jason blinked, trying to process the cognitive dissonance. How do you know that error code? Because I wrote the error handler, I said, in 1982, on a Tuesday. It was raining. I wrote it to prevent exactly this scenario, assuming that no one would be stupid enough to ignore the data types. I underestimated the future. You wrote it? Sarah whispered. Dad, you were a payroll clerk. That was the cover title, Sarah, I said, leaning against the counter. You don't put lead architect of the national banking infrastructure on a LinkedIn profile. It attracts the wrong kind of attention. Jason looked at his laptop. He looked at the error screen. System error 0C7. You haven't deleted the legacy code, Jason. You can't. It's not just software, it's the foundation. You built a skyscraper on top of a Roman aqueduct and then tried to blow up the aqueduct with dynamite because it looked old. Now your building is sinking into the mud. Can you fix it? Jason asked, his voice cracking. Grandpa, please. I don't want to go to jail. I don't know, I said. You made a very big mess. Before I could say more, the front of the house exploded with light. Not a fire, searchlights. A deafening roar shook the windows. The plates rattled in the cupboards. What is that? Sarah screamed. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. A Black Hawk helicopter was landing on the front lawn. It was crushing Sarah's prize-winning rose bushes. The wind from the rotors was tearing the shingles off the roof of the garage. 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt in the driveway, blocking Jason's Tesla. Federal agents, open up. The voice was amplified by a megaphone. Bang, bang, bang. The front door shook. They're here to arrest me, Jason whimpered, sliding down the cabinets to the floor. I'm done. My life is over. Mom, don't let them take me. Sarah ran to the door, terrified but protective. She unlocked it. 6 men in full tactical gear stormed in. They had rifles. They had body armor. They filled the small entryway instantly. Behind them walked a man in a suit. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He walked with purpose. He stepped into the kitchen. He ignored Sarah, who was cowering against the wall. He ignored Jason, who was weeping on the floor. He looked around the room. His eyes locked on me. "Mr. Evans?" the suit asked. I nodded. "Agent, you're late." "Traffic was bad," the agent said dryly, "and we had to clear the airspace." "You can't take my son," Sarah screamed, jumping in front of Jason. "He didn't mean to do it. It was a glitch. He's a good boy." The agent looked at Sarah, then down at Jason, who was curled in a fetal position, clutching his MacBook. He looked at Jason like he was a stain on a very expensive rug. "Ma'am, we aren't here for the boy. The boy is irrelevant. He's a liability." The agent stepped over Jason's legs. He walked straight to me. He extended a hand. "Mr. Evans, I'm Special Agent Miller. I have the chairman of the Federal Reserve on a secure line in the chopper. We have a situation red." "I know," I said. "I've been watching the logs." "The President has authorized the Defense Production Act," Miller said. "We need you to come with us immediately." "Me?" Jason squeaked from the floor, a glimmer of desperate hope in his eyes. "You need me? I'm the product lead. I can explain the architecture." Miller didn't even turn his head. "Step aside, kid. You broke it. We need the man who built it." Miller looked at me with desperate respect. "Mr. Evans, the liquidity markets will collapse in 4 hours if the ledger isn't restored. Apex's tech team is useless. They are trying to patch a dam with chewing gum." "They tried a hot swap on a Sunday," I said, shaking my head. Miller winced. "So we heard. Can you fix it?" I looked at Jason. He was staring at me with a mixture of horror and awe. The grandfather he had mocked for not knowing how to use a remote control was now being addressed by the U.S. government as the only thing standing between civilization and anarchy. "The index pointers are corrupted," I said. "I need to manually rebuild the VSAM clusters using the raw hex data from the transaction logs. I'll need a terminal with root access to the Z-Series mainframe, and I need a carton of cigarettes, Lucky Strikes, unfiltered." "We have a secure SIF waiting in the helicopter," Miller said, "and we can get you the cigarettes. We'll get you anything you want." I set my water bottle down on the counter. I looked at Sarah. She was pale, her mouth slightly open. "Sarah, I won't be home for dinner tomorrow. Don't wait up." I looked at Jason. "Jason," he flinched. Yes, Grandpa?" "Don't touch the laptop," I said. "You've done enough disrupting for one lifetime. Sit on your hands." I walked toward the door. The tactical team parted to let me through, forming a protective phalanx around me. As I stepped out into the night, the wind from the helicopter rotors whipped my thinning hair and my cardigan. I didn't feel like an old man with bad knees. I felt like I did in 1974. The code was broken. The world was burning. And I was the only one who knew the language of the fire. I climbed into the helicopter. I put on the headset. "Get me a terminal," I said to the pilot, "and get me a compiler. It's going to be a long night." The engine roared. We lifted off, leaving the house, the genius grandson, and the modern world behind. We were going back to the source. The helicopter touched down on the reinforced roof of the data center in New Jersey with a thud that rattled my teeth. The rotors were still spinning, slicing through the humid night air. As the door slid open, the smell hit me instantly. Jet fuel, ozone, and the distinct metallic tang of high-voltage anxiety. "Move, move, move!" a soldier shouted, his voice fighting the wind. He ushered me out onto the tarmac. I didn't run. I walked. At 71, running is a calculated risk I rarely take, and certainly not for the government. Besides, panic is a symptom of ignorance. Panic is what happens when you don't know the solution. I knew the solution, I just didn't know if I had the time to type it. They flanked me, 2 agents on each side, and guided me toward the blast doors. Jason was behind us, stumbling, flanked by another agent who was holding him by the elbow, not to support him, but to ensure he didn't faint. My grandson looked like a ghost. His face was pale, his eyes wide and unseeing. He was mumbling something about uptime and SLAS. We took a freight elevator down 3 levels. The silence in the car was heavy. I checked my watch. 1:15 a.m. The Asian markets would open in 45 minutes. If the ledger wasn't reconciled by then, the liquidity freeze would cross the Pacific. By breakfast, ATMs in Tokyo would stop working. By lunch, the London Exchange would halt trading. The elevator doors opened into a scene from a disaster movie. The war room was a cavernous space, a converted underground bunker filled with wall-to-wall screens. Every single one of them was flashing crimson red. Dozens of people, most of them under 30, wearing hoodies, lanyards, and expressions of sheer terror, were running around like ants whose hill had been kicked over. The noise was deafening, shouting, phones ringing, the hum of cooling fans spinning at maximum RPM, and the underlying static of servers struggling to process a backlog of billions of failed transactions. "Mr. Evans!" A man in a military uniform, a general with 3 stars on his shoulder, strode toward me. He looked tired. His uniform was crisp, but his eyes were bloodshot. "General Holloway," I nodded. We had met once, 20 years ago, during the Y2K preparations. He was a captain then. He remembered. "Thank God," Holloway said, gripping my hand with a strength that suggested desperation. "We're bleeding out, Bill. The Fed is printing money just to keep the interbank lending rates from dividing by 0, but it's a stopgap. We need the core. We need the ledger." "Where's the patient?" I asked. "This way." He led me to the center of the room. There was a glass-walled enclosure, isolated from the noise of the floor. Inside sat the main console, a formidable bank of monitors, and a single chair. And there, sitting in the corner on a folding chair, looking like a wet dog that had been kicked out into the rain, was Jason. They had brought him. Of course they had. He was the lead architect. He needed to sign off on the fix, technically, or perhaps they just wanted him to watch his legacy burn. When he saw me, he stood up. He looked small. The arrogance of the dinner table, the disruptor confidence, was gone. "Grandpa," he whispered, they said you could help. But how? It's a cloud cluster. You don't know Kubernetes. You don't know the stack." "Sit down, Jason," I said. I sat in the main chair. It was comfortable, expensive mesh. The desk was cluttered with half-eaten pizza and energy drinks. I swept them aside with my arm, clearing the workspace. A young man with a nose ring and a Google t-shirt ran up to me, holding an iPad Pro. "Sir, here is the dashboard for the observability suite," he stammered. "It shows the pod health and the latency spikes in the microservices." I looked at the iPad. It showed pretty, colorful 3D graphs. It showed the problem's symptoms, dressed up in marketing colors. I pushed the iPad away. "Get me a keyboard," I said. "A real one, mechanical, PS2 connection if you have it, and kill these screens." I pointed to the wall of monitors showing the red graphs. "Sir?" The young man looked confused. "But the dashboard—" "It's noise," I said. "I need to see the machine, not the marketing." "Kill it." General Holloway nodded to a technician. "Do it." The wall screens went black. The room dimmed. The ambient noise seemed to drop. Someone scrambled and found a heavy beige keyboard, an IBM Model M. I smiled. Someone in IT still had taste. I plugged it in. The click of the connector was satisfying. I pulled up a terminal window. Give me root access, I said to the general. Authorization Alpha 1 0 Tango, the general barked into a headset. The screen flickered. The colorful, graphical user interface vanished. The icons, the windows, the mouse pointer, all gone. We were in the dark now, just a black screen, a blinking green cursor. I took a deep breath. The smell of the server room, cold air, hot silicon, dust, filled my lungs. It was the smell of my youth. It was the smell of 1974. I typed. TSO Logan user equals ghost. The system hesitated, then welcomed me. I wasn't looking at pods or containers. I was looking at the iron, the IBM Z-series mainframe that lay buried beneath layers of modern abstraction like a titan sleeping beneath a city of glass. Okay, I muttered, cracking my knuckles. Let's see what you broke. I called up the job control language, JCL logs. I didn't use a search function. I scrolled through the raw hex dump. It was worse than I thought. Jason's migration script hadn't just crashed the application. It had corrupted the VSAM, Virtual Storage Access Method, data sets. The index keys, the addresses that told the bank where the money was, were scrambled. You re-index the database using ASCII sorting, I said, my voice cutting through the silence of the glass enclosure. Jason blinked, stepping closer. What? ASCII, I said, not looking up. Standard sorting, but the mainframe uses EBCDIC. Jason looked blank. What? EBCDIC, I said. Extended binary coded decimal interchange code. In ASCII, numbers come before letters. In EBCDIC, letters come before numbers. Your script sorted the entire customer database backward. You didn't just lose the money, Jason. You gave everyone else's money to the wrong people. You shuffled the deck, but you did it with the lights off. Jason turned a shade of pale green I had never seen on a human being before. Oh, God. Can we just reverse the sort? No, I said, because you overwrote the pointers. The map is gone, the data is there floating in the dark, but we don't know which block belongs to which account. Is it fixable? The general asked, his hand resting on the back of my chair. The data is immutable, I said. The magnetic tape backups from the silos still exist, but they are cold. Restoring them would take 3 days. We have... I checked the clock. 38 minutes. So we're dead, Jason whispered. I killed the bank. I have to rebuild the index, I said, manually. There are 50 million accounts, Jason cried, hysteria rising in his voice. You can't do it manually. We need to write a script. We can ask the AI to generate a Python script to scan the blocks, and I spun my chair around. The motion was violent enough to silence him instantly. Jason, I said. My voice was low, cold steel. You are thinking in high-level abstractions. You are thinking in languages that hold your hand. There is no Python here. There is no AI. There is no cloud to save you. There is only the metal and the math. I pointed at the screen. If I run a script now, the overhead will crash the CPU, which is already overheating trying to process your billions of errors. The garbage collection alone would freeze the core. I have to patch the binary directly in memory. I have to perform open-heart surgery while the patient is sprinting a marathon. I turned back to the screen. I need silence. Absolute silence. If anyone speaks, General, remove them. Understood, Holloway said. He put a hand on his sidearm. He wasn't joking. I closed my eyes for a second. I visualized the architecture I had built 40 years ago. I walked through the memory palace of the code, address 0040A0, the transaction buffer. It's overflowing. Address 0080B0, the master key index. It's pointed at null. Offset 04, the account number. I opened my eyes. I began to type. I wasn't writing words. I wasn't writing English. I was writing opcodes. D204800B00, move 4 bytes from address A to address B. I entered the hex editor. The screen filled with pairs of numbers and letters C1E 2D440F 0F1. To Jason, standing behind me, it was nonsense. It was the Matrix code. To me, it was music. C1 was A. 40 was a space. D2 was the opcode for move. I was manually stitching the database back together, byte by byte, creating a bypass for the corrupted index. I was building a temporary bridge out of light and logic. Time, I asked, my voice rasping. 20 minutes to Tokyo Open, the general said. My fingers flew across the keys. The rhythmic clack, clack, clack of the Model M was the only sound in the room. It was a machine gun of logic. It was a drumbeat of war. Sweat beaded on my forehead. The air conditioning in the SCIF was set to 60 degrees, but I was burning up. My arthritis flared in my knuckles, a hot, grinding pain that shot up my arms. I ignored it. Pain is just a signal. I could deprioritize it. "He's fast," someone whispered outside the glass. "He's not fast," Jason whispered back, his voice filled with a strange, terrified awe. "He's fluent. He's speaking to it. He's not translating. He's just speaking." I hit a roadblock. The compiler was locked. The system thought it was in a security lockdown, Jason's Sentinel security protocol, and refused to accept the new instructions. "It's rejecting the patch," I muttered. "Security violation. Access denied to memory sector 7G. "We need an override," a technician shouted. "We need the encryption keys. Call the vendor." "No time," I said. "The vendor is asleep in Silicon Valley." I had to hack my own system. I remembered a trap door I had left in the login routine in 1987. A maintenance hatch I had coded for myself, just in case I ever locked my keys in the car. A specific sequence of hexadecimal inputs that would force a buffer overflow and dump the user into supervisor state. I hesitated. If this failed, the system would interpret it as a hostile attack and wipe the memory. "Grandpa," Jason breathed. "Quiet," I hissed. I typed the sequence. It was a joke I had written 40 years ago. Dead Beef Cafe F00D. I hit enter. The screen flashed white, then black. Supervisor mode, active. "Welcome, creator." "Got you," I whispered. I injected the patch. I rerouted the memory pointers. I defined the new sorting logic, translating Jason's ASCII garbage back into the holy EBCDIC. I wrote a translation layer in 30 seconds that would normally take a team of 20 engineers a month to scope. 10 minutes, the general barked. "Tokyo is coming online." "Done," I said. I hovered my finger over the enter key. It wasn't a sleek, silent key like on Jason's laptop. It was a chunky, gray block of plastic. "This is it," I said. "When I press this, the system will do a warm restart. It will take the new index. If I made a typo, if I missed a single bit, if I mistook a 0 for an O, the database will collapse into entropy, and the money is gone forever." I spun the chair around to face Jason. "Do you want to press it, product lead? It's your launch." Jason stepped back, shaking his head rapidly. He held up his hands. No, I can't. I don't know what it does. I don't know if it's right." "That has been your problem all along, Jason," I said. "You know how to use things. You don't know what they are. You want the glory of the launch, but you can't handle the weight of the landing." I turned back to the console. "General, hold on to something." I pressed enter. Clack. The screen went black. The hum of the servers in the room seemed to drop in pitch. The lights on the modem racks in the outer room flickered and died. Silence. Absolute terrifying silence. 1 second. 2 seconds. 10 seconds. "Did it work?" Sarah's voice echoed in my head. "Dad, you can't even use the remote." Suddenly a cursor blinked. System IPL complete. Apex Core Banking. V1.0 Legacy. Status online. Transaction. Queue processing. Numbers began to scroll, fast, then faster, a blur of green. Batch 001 reconciled. Batch 002 reconciled. Tokyo. Link. Established. A cheer went up in the outer room. It started low and became a roar. People were hugging. I saw a grown man fall to his knees and weep. The general let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. On the big wall, which the technician turned back on, the red graphs turned green. The liquidity crisis was over. The money was back. I slumped in the chair. My hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the crushing exhaustion of a 71-year-old man who had just bench-pressed the global economy. Jason walked up to me. He looked at the screen, at the green text he couldn't read. He touched the edge of the monitor. "You did it," he said. "You actually fixed it. How did you type so fast?" "I didn't type fast, Jason," I said, rubbing my eyes. "I just knew where the keys were." I stood up. My back cracked. I felt every year of my age. "General," I said, "I'm tired. I want to go home." "Mr. Evans," the general said, snapping to attention. He saluted me. It wasn't a formal military salute, but a gesture of profound respect. "You just saved the United States government about $4 trillion. Name your price. Anything. A job? A consultant fee? We can set you up as the CTO of Apex. We can fire everyone in this building and let you hire your own team." I looked at the chaos of the room. I looked at the dashboards and the iPads and the panic. I looked at Jason, who was looking at me like I was a superhero he had just discovered living in his basement. "I don't want a job," I said. "I'm retired. I have a garden to tend." I looked at Jason. "But I will send you an invoice for the consulting time, emergency rates." Jason swallowed hard. "How much?" "My rate is $10,000, I said. Jason looked relieved. "10,000? That's very reasonable. We can pay that out of petty cash." $10,000, I continued, "per line of code." Jason's eyes bugged out. How many lines did you write?" "About 200, I lied. It was closer to 50. But that was the asshole tax. And I want it in a cashier's check. No crypto, no stock options. Paper money." The helicopter ride back was quiet. The sun was rising over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. When I walked into the house, it was 6 a.m. Sarah was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the news. She looked like she hadn't moved all night. The headline on the TV read, "Banking Crisis Averted. System Glitch Resolved. Federal Reserve Credits Unknown Hero." When she heard the door, she stood up. She looked at me, really looked at me. Not as the old man who needed help with the stairs, not as the burden she had to feed, but as the man who had just been dropped off by a black military helicopter on her front lawn for the second time in 12 hours. "Dad," she asked softly, "is it true?" Jason called from the car. He said, "You are a wizard. He said you saved everything." I took off my coat. It smelled of jet fuel. "I'm not a wizard, Sarah," I said. "I'm a mechanic. I just tightened a bolt." I walked to the kitchen. I was starving. "Jason isn't coming home tonight," Sarah said. He was let go. Apex fired the whole leadership team, the general. He told Jason he was lucky not to be in Guantanamo. "Good," I said. "He needs to learn from the bottom up. Start him on a help desk. Let him reset passwords for a year. It builds character." I opened the fridge and took out the leftover meatloaf. I didn't bother heating it up. I ate it standing over the sink, watching the birds wake up in the backyard. "Dad," Sarah said, coming into the kitchen. She hesitated, then hugged me. It was a tight, desperate hug. "I'm sorry about the remote, about treating you like you were obsolete. I didn't know. I swallowed a bite of meatloaf. I patted her back. I am obsolete, Sarah, I said. The world has moved on. It's faster, prettier, louder. It has touchscreens and AI. I pulled away and tapped my temple. But underneath the paint, the world still runs on logic. And logic doesn't age. I washed my plate. I dried my hands. I'm going to bed. Don't wake me up before noon. And Sarah? Yes, Dad? The check that is coming, it's going to be large, very large. Use it to pay off the house. And maybe send Jason to a trade school. Plumbing is a good career, harder to crash a toilet than a bank. She laughed, a tear rolling down her cheek. Okay, Dad. And one more thing. I pointed to the coffee table. Get a new remote, one with buttons. I'm done with touchscreens. I want to feel the click. I walked down the hallway to my in-law suite. I sat down in my armchair. I looked at my amber screen, still glowing in the corner. Logon successful. Welcome, ghost. I smiled. I wasn't a dinosaur. I was the bedrock. You can build whatever you want on top of me, glass towers, cloud servers, AI dreams. But when the earth shakes, you better hope the bedrock holds. And the bedrock sleeps soundly.